Okay. All right. Okay. Again, good afternoon, everyone. Before we go any further, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping details in our Zoom session for this evening. If you can use the chat box if you have questions. We will be having a Q&A session towards the end or at the end of the program. And we also ask that you please don't try to unmute your microphone during the program. So if you could just please pay attention to those details and we'll have a smooth program. So again, good afternoon. I want to welcome you all to today's Third Thursday Brown Bag Lunchtime Series program. My name is Robert Kinney. I'm the Outreach Services Librarian here at the State Library. So again, I want to welcome you all to this program. We are excited to present to you today a special presentation. We're going to hear from the concerned parents of color of West Hartford and the Yukon History Department, and they will lead a presentation on the general emancipation, the continued effects of slavery on modern Black America in Connecticut. And as we know, slavery in Connecticut dates back to the mid-1600s, and by the time the American Revolution took place, Connecticut had more enslaved Africans than any other state in New England. Adrian Billings Smith and Dr. Jason Oliver Chang and Jaya Kai will share their four-part research strategy, curriculum on slavery and the gradual emancipation in Connecticut. So at this time, please give a warm Zoom welcome to our Third Thursday panelists for today.
Hey everyone. Like Robert was saying, my name is Jason Chang. I'm Associate Professor of History and Asian American Studies at the University of Connecticut. Also direct the Asian and Asian American Studies Institute. And it brings me really great pleasure to be here with everyone and to share our work. We're here together because of the activism that Adrian has been doing since the summer to really highlight the struggle for Black life in a local context. And so when I'm also a resident of West Hartford, and so seeing our community reckon with the history of slavery really was inspiring to me. And I thought this is the kind of work that really deserves the kind of support from the state's public university. And so I devised a program of community leader in residence, which would bring the work that Adrian's doing and the historical rigor with which she is interested in delving into the history of West Hartford, bring that into the university, but then also have the world-class resources of an R1 university put at the disposal of local activists. And we've been able to do some amazing work together over the last semester, and I'm excited to share that work with y'all. And so just to kind of put lay out how we're gonna talk about this this afternoon. I'm just gonna kind of talk a little bit more about the program, and then Adrian is going to discuss more the research strategy and the kind of overall picture of how this work is developed and taken shape. And then we're going to also bring in Gia, who's going to talk about our future plans with the virtual magazine. And so part of what we wanted to do was integrate these struggles with a really rigorous kind of historical research that engage both faculty as well as students in that process. And so this has been really collaborative project from the beginning. And the Connecticut State Library has been a wonderful partner in this and in seeking out the primary sources needed to kind of answer these questions about Black life in Connecticut. And so this is the kind of research that I think demonstrates the commitment to racial justice, but that also the struggle for Black life today also means valuing Black life in the past. And so this is, in order for that to happen, we have to have a historical context in which people can see themselves. So I really see this as a valuable public effort to transform both our cultural understanding of the history of Connecticut, but then also to make that history visible in the landscape, and to change how we think about our state and how we live together. And so, with that, I want to, just turn it over to Adrian, and you can share more about the work we've been doing.
Thanks so much, Jason. And I just want to thank everyone for having us here today for this presentation. As Jason said, during the summer, we met over the Juneteenth celebration and kind of, collided in our in our life and what we love to do, and that's to research and to talk about history and marginalized communities and bring those things to life. When we started this project, the community leader in residence, when I was appointed to this position, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew that through what I had been learning about Connecticut history, and specifically West Hartford history and Greater Hartford history, is that we had, slavery, but we have these lively and deep Black communities within our and individuals within our history that, their voices needed to be heard. I credit some of that to, the Witness Stone Project and Tracy Wilson to bringing that to light in our community and to our children. And I just wanted to dig deeper and figure out where these communities lie and how these individuals lived, and then to bring it in full circle into modern, a modern day, to speak on different social and political things that have happened and that are continuing to affect our community. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen and kind of give you a little background. Some of you have been to some open houses, but hold on one second. So as the project is called Gradual Emancipation, the Continued Effects of Slavery on Modern American Connecticut. For those of you who don't know a little bit about New England history, what happened was throughout New England, when they were trying to figure out how to abolish slavery, they came up with the concept of gradual emancipation. Connecticut, I believe, started in 1783, started gradual emancipation, 1770, yeah, I think it's 1783, excuse me. And Connecticut ended slavery finally in 1848. But this idea of gradual emancipation was that it gave owners and, the individuals that they enslaved time to kind of get used to the idea that slavery would no longer exist. So I chose this title for the project because it continues, you see, with policies that are continuing to affect the Black community all over the world and all over the United States. You see that there's still some sort of gradual emancipation in the way that, the Black life is viewed. So that was the reasoning behind the actual naming of this project. So why does this project matter here and now? Blackness, like all other places on earth, has powerfully, hold on one second. I'm trying to get my thing off. I apologize. There we go. Blackness, like all other places on earth, has powerfully shaped Connecticut from an original colony to its current status today. Unlike other places where familial history can be traced back to large plantations of the South and New England and Greater Hartford in particular, the significance of Black lives has been hidden and forgotten. We not only lose our connection to the past when it is not honored and incorporated into our shared historical imagination, but the erasure enacts its own violence. For Black lives to matter, they have to be known, and the experience of Blackness needs to be shared to have significance. So, with our project, we're doing 4 different phases. We started with census work, family search, primary resources to kind of map out where the Black individuals were in Connecticut and where Black lives were in Connecticut. So with this, Jason will show you a little bit later, we comprised all of our census data and whatever other data we were able to collect, and we started to create maps based around Greater Hartford to show you kind of the migration of the Black communities throughout, from slavery to freedom, and then eventually to modern day. It will do that. So we started around 1750, the census data started around 1790, and you get to see the different spaces that Black people have lived in, but you get to see within that enslavement and how people become freer over time. We'll also, with that mapping project, we'll start to trace the migration of slavery and people of color, free people of color through these Black communities. When I was researching, we started to find large pockets of Black communities in Granby and Plainville, doing parallel research with Christine Pitsley of the Connecticut State Library. She has New Haven, that entire region, entire area. And we started to see these migrations of individuals moving from New Haven to Granby to Plainville up into Southern Mass and Western Mass. So we're gonna continue to map that progress to see where these large pockets of these communities grew and where they ended up moving out of once slavery was completely over, because you see a migration of people moving out of some of these areas that are now predominantly what we would consider white suburban areas of Greater Hartford. Our second and third phase will be about social and political disparities. We want to identify and analyze the significance and impact of anti-Black policy, from gradual emancipation to redlining, housing issues, establish format to create anti-racist curriculum through factual historical narratives. We'll be working with the students of the Leadership and Diversity program at University of Connecticut. They're undergraduate and graduate students who will be writing curriculum based on sample curriculum based on our research in order to try to implement it into our K through 12 schools and buildings. We seek to mobilize support for anti-racist reforms in housing, education, health, work and environment, and policy initiatives. Gio will talk a little bit about that through our virtual magazine that we would like to publish and put out, called the Systemic Change Initiative, that we've partnered with a local graphic designer and a budding activist and ally who would like to bring change and awareness to things that are going on throughout our state that are impacting marginalized communities, especially Black communities, and help build the next generation of leaders and activists in order to further contribute to the Black community's political and social strength. To do that, we wanted to make sure that our children are getting the education that they deserve, and that they're being supported through, programs like this and other organizations who want to do better socially, politically, educationally, and all those other ways. Next, our last and final phase, and the one that is something I'm so excited about, is Black genealogy of Greater Hartford. this actually took off a few days ago. Last week, I was doing some research trying to put stories together about the Freemans, a little history about the Freemans. It's a name that was taken by a lot of Black individuals when they were granted their freedom. So you have these pockets of Freemans that are from Westfield, Massachusetts, all the way down to Windsor, Massachusetts, that end up marrying each other and creating this huge community for 50 to 100 miles. But with that being said, on a personal note, I posted something for, sorry, trying to get you guys back up here so I can see you. I posted, about my research, and sorry, here I am. I posted about my research, and I had a friend, a friend who actually replied. He said, well, let me know if you know about this certain family and how they connect. And I go, okay, just send me some dates and I will, see what I can find out. And I was able to start to find pieces of his family. So if any of you are familiar with the Loomises, they're one of the most prominent Connecticut families of like I said, of Connecticut. So he sends me the name of an individual, Augusta Loomis, who is his great grandmother. And Christine and I, Pitsley, start to go to work and figure out where does Augusta come from? Where does she get a Loomis name? He's a Black individual with deep Connecticut roots. So we go on to find her lineage all the way up to Joseph Loomis, and Joseph Loomis is the individual who settled Windsor, Connecticut. And we find it through twists and turns and illegitimate children, and we end up with this beautiful tree, this lineage of coming down from someone so prominent in this white family, ending with having these Black descendants. And I tell that piece of the story because that's what this project is, why it matters, is that at the end of the day, connecting people, Black people, to their lineage is so important because there's closure, there's validation, and there's a story to be told. So I get emotional about it because a lot of us don't have our history. So to see this and to build this story has been so validating for myself also. So yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to initiate change for the Black community through various ways, through genealogy, through policy, through education, to make the future better for our children.
Well said, Adrienne. Thank you so much for sharing the story and shedding a light on how all of these, your vision for the research has all fit together at different stages, because I think each one is really important to building on the next, and that in order to have that kind of change that we want to see, we have to know where we've come from. And this is a kind of reckoning that needs to happen, and for people to be invested in change, they have to know that they belong to it. And so this is a really crucial kind of feature, I feel like, of the way you've designed this research, is to have these these various points of connection that paint a detailed picture for people to associate themselves with. So I'm going to share my screen here just to kind of deepen that picture. Can you all see this title slide? Okay, cool. So what we did was we took Adrienne's data that looked at both the census figures for enslaved populations and free people of color. And this was a really important innovation because other histories of slavery only considered those people who were counted by the census as being enslaved. But what we know about gradual emancipation is that this was up to the owner to decide how to report their enslaved individuals. And we know that this is inconsistent and it changes over time. And so we knew that in order to get a more accurate picture of Black life in Connecticut, we needed to incorporate free people of color, not just as free people of color, but as a proxy for understanding those different variations, those different conditions in which people lived out gradual emancipation. So what you see here on the top, so these maps are organized by year vertically, and then they're stacked by enslaved and then free people of color on the bottom. And so if you kind of look at this sweep from 1790 to 1810, what you see is a decline in the enslaved population on the top, but then you see greater concentration of enslaved folks in central Connecticut, right? And if we continue, we see that slavery again, begins to, reappears in 1820, and then declines again with greater concentrations of free people of color in the 1840s. And then finally with the 1850s, where we see, where we come to the closure of gradual emancipation. And then we see, that there are other communities of free people of color, Black-owned households in other places in the state besides the urban centers and East Hartford here. And just as a part of the structure of the data and the historical boundaries of these places, that location of East Hartford is really a categorization of the Hartford area. It's hard to kind of make the data do what it's supposed to do when the historical change of the boundaries is upset, right? So or changes. So what this really tells us then is there is another kind of story about Black life in the state that it has to do with migration and the consequences of gradual emancipation. And so, what we see here is that as slavery declines, we see a greater, that people of color are leaving the countryside and coming into cities, right? And so, that provokes some questions for us that aren't immediately, legible to us. And so, once emancipation has been is the law of the land, how did towns and municipalities think of their definition of inclusion or their definitions of citizenship? And it really begs the question: how did towns and municipalities define segregation measures? This would not have been would not have been odd for them to pass laws of segregation or to practice them informally. And that leads us to asking about policing. How has policing changed over time? And is that in response to the local migrations of Black folks and free people of color in these moments of transformation? And as Black folks are moving and responding to different kinds of legal conditions over their status and their citizenship, what is the economic change that they're responding to, and how does that affect the composition of the Black family, right? And when we start asking questions like that, we can get to other kinds of things about that are beyond racialization. But how did Black people live in rural spaces? What were their lives like? And what were their communities like day to day? These and that kind of understanding, or that kind of historical context really paints a bigger picture for people to tell their own family histories, and to put them into another context. Because as this change is happening, this is also the first really large wave of immigration from Europe too. And so you have at the same time, and while new immigrants are coming in, you have Black folks are changing their communities too. And so this is an opportunity to think about new interactions between free folks of color and new immigrants. And then, these also lead us to asking questions about the legacy of rural Black communities, and that under our current, kind of understanding, really, is a kind of urbanized, racialized experience. And so when we think about rural space and the role that Black communities play, it really opens up the kind of the space for people to tell those stories and to have them fit into a larger kind of narrative about Connecticut. And so, these are the kinds of things that I think are gonna help to both, bring a kind of curiosity and excitement into doing historical work, but then also seeing how the work that's been done in West Hartford it can be a model for reckoning with the past for other towns. And that's where we see, the kind of, what we've done with this research is to put it into a 3-week curriculum that can be used as a background for other communities to think about pursuing this line of questioning on their own. If they have the resources and they have this background information, it makes other stories make sense, and I think that's why, we're excited to share this and to see it grow and to have other people contribute and really, tell a story in a big way. But I don't know, Adrian, did you want to add anything before we let Gia take over?
No, I think you put that perfectly, Jason, building on top of one another, each of these stories, and doing it through different facets where people can find a place where they want to be a part of it, whether it be through education, through watching the research, develop, to being a part of it through the social political aspects of it. Because at the end of the day, we want all this history that we're taking, and you speak about reckoning with, and make sure that we're starting to implement some of those changes into our modern policies in our state. And that's the only way to do so, is you have to recognize your past. And like you said, you're talking about the migration and the newness of freedom, and how that plays out into segregating communities and Black communities starting to migrate and move around. I mean, it makes it answers some questions that I don't think we've all been able to get together and put all of our research together and start to really answer those questions in order to affect what's going on today, because we are suffering from so many disparities, inequities, and still systemic racism within our state, based on policies that were done, forever ago. So we have to keep moving forward and continue to do this research, but we have to do it on a localized level so that everyone starts to learn about their community and then come together to do more, as whatever your lane of activism is. So thank you. You said it perfectly. Um, Jason, and I can introduce her also. Gia, who is our program coordinator for our project, is going to present on kind of how all of these come together, so you can kind of find your lane and find how you want to be involved, if you want to be involved, if you want to contribute to anything. She'll discuss kind of the rest of our project and the virtual magazine that we want to develop in order to bring all of this to light for today.
All right, thank you, Adrian. Well, hi everyone, my name is Gia, and then I'm just going to quickly share my screen to kind of show you about the 3 main projects that we've been working on at this point. Can you all see this? Everything good? All right. So first project that I want to highlight is that we are currently seeking partnership with educators and historians around the Great Hartford area and then just in Connecticut in general, which we are currently reaching out to four-year sector higher education institutions, public high schools, and then libraries in the public libraries in the Great Hartford area to see, if they have any resources available, and then for specifically the public schools and the higher education institutions, if they, if they offer major or minor any sort of ethnic studies, the sample curriculum, reading materials, syllabus that they have been using for their classes, and then how they structure their classes, as in, like if it's kind of being their, standalone classes or just, being part of a major kind of a US history classes, and then how they structure their content as well. And then on top of that, we're also curious about how these educators access their resources, whether, they use, resources from the state, the CERC database, or if they know anything else that they've been, frequently using. And then as for the local kind of public library context, we're also curious about if they have done any programming like specifically focused on Black history or like local Connecticut Black history. So kind of just quickly show you all about the timeline about where we are at. So we're kind of in the end phase of kind of reaching out to everyone, waiting for everyone to get responses back. And then we will be kind of moving forward to kind of organize all these responses to see if there's any common themes or anything helpful that we're able to, find and pull out starting next week. And then hopefully we'll be able to share these results with community partners or anyone that are interested in, receiving these resources by I guess mid-March to end March. And then second thing that we're working on, as Jason and Adrian already mentioned, is our virtual magazine titled Systemic Change Initiative, tentatively. So this is a free-for-all monthly virtual magazine featuring educational and policy topics related to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And then it's related research materials, application, and then the community engagement aspect of like how folks can kind of also partake in our research and in the things that we're currently doing. So specific, in order to make it happen, we've been working and interviewing community partners and scholars such as professors at universities, and then local photographers, and then other folks that have their expertise in these kind of conversations. And then we have decided our first issue to be focusing on college student access, with a focus on equity in education and then mental health for students during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we plan to kind of talk about how and why is it challenging for especially students from underrepresented backgrounds to gain college access, whether it's 2-year sector, 4-year sector, community college, and then also kind of the local impact. For example, like UConn canceling Connecticut Commitment, which was the program that was supposed to offer, students from low-income family with free 4-year tuitions. And then we're also looking to kind of collecting other partners testimonies and see how this specific example or just like examples in general have affected their education, especially higher education, and their access to higher education. So also quickly timeline, we already finalized all the topics, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of finalize all the written materials by Monday, March 15th, and hopefully publish the first issue of our magazine on the very beginning of April. So moving on to our last project that we're working on. So we're kind of in the process of surveying and then interviewing college students about their awareness about certain policy topics, especially that locally impact students in Connecticut. We're planning to using a mixed methods approach to assess first year and second year college students' awareness towards their K through 12 education curricula, like what they have just received within their education, and then policies that affect the BiPOC Connecticut college student experience, such as undocumented student, DACA, and then as I mentioned, the Connecticut Commitment as an example, and a lot of financial resources that are available for the BiPOC students and families. So for this project, we're closely working with the UConn First Year Experience Office, which they offer program kind of to the incoming and then transferring new UConn students about, just the college experience, how they can successfully help them to transition into college life. So we'll be surveying them first, and then after we getting the results, we'll kind of reach out to, folks that have declared that their interest for an interview, to kind of just really closely asking their experience, such as, like, oh, like, did your school offer, let's say, Asian American studies, Black studies, and then Latinx AO studies, and do you believe, it's important for your institution to kind of offer these classes? And then do you believe that, like, if you are interested in taking one of those classes during your time at UConn? So this is it from me. And then before we move on to Q&A, I was just wondering if Jason and Adrian have anything to add. All right.
Oh, that was great, Gia. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have to add that Gia has introduced a whole new level of structure to our enterprise, and very grateful for the timelines and keeping us all organized. This is really seriously a team effort, and really appreciate having Gia on board. Your energy and expertise in thinking about these problems and everything is such a wonderful addition. I mean, just to kind of put those projects in context, these are outcomes that we didn't really plan on having when we started the Community Leader in Residence program, but I think it's the process of kind of engaging in activism and thinking critically about how to create the biggest impact, and then devising in process the ways that we want to expand or evolve or change the direction to have a greater impact, or to reach different audiences. And those are things that have come out through the process of the research and engaging with communities, and seeing how the work has transformed the landscape in West Hartford with the renaming of Goodman Green in West Hartford to Unity Green. I think that's a really clear example. I would love, Adrian, if you could say a couple words about that success. I think it really speaks volumes.
Yeah, before the project even started, right, the Concerned Parents of Color of West Hartford had already started, their activism and doing that. And as you said, it shows the direction that we as a community are moving in. When you have something, Goodman Green was named after a former slave owner. It sits in the middle of West Hartford. And the First Church of West Hartford owns the land, and the town actually leases the land, and it's been going on for 200 years. So when I found out the name of Goodman Green, I proposed that we rename it to Unity Green through the town and through the church, and just to see, as your community work through their history, the church, started to rewrite their history to do more informative. Those are the things that you're looking for. You're not deleting any history. History cannot be, it shouldn't be deleted, I should say, or erased. But what you're doing is you're starting to complete that history. You're starting to give a larger view of history, and including voices in your history that you might not have included before. So just to watch that work itself out and continue to do so, and then finally getting the vote through the congregation to rename the land Unity Green, because they thought it was important enough, really speaks volumes, to the community and where you wanted to go. And it just starts with the renaming. It's what you do with that land now to ensure that the individuals that worked it are heard, and their voices and their histories are told. And that's the big part of this research project. That's the underlying thing that keeps us running, is to ensure that those voices are being heard, and their stories are being told, and that their families and their descendants are hearing their stories and hearing their history. So Unity Green seems small, but it's not, because it leads to so much more, and to deeper conversations about your community, especially in the greater Hartford area, because there's so much history that we don't know about and our students don't know about that they should know about. Especially with the passing of, African American, Latinx, and Asian American and Native studies. It has to be spoken about. And as I said before, you have to have local history embedded, because, people will assume that it's not a part of them. And it is. So, yeah.
Okay. I think we can open it up for questions from the audience at this time. I do have a question from Facebook. The first question is, will people be able to add stories, maybe on History Pen? And this is a question for the panelist.
Yeah, that's the plan. And Jason, please chime in also. You're stuck here with me. Yeah, our plan is to gather these stories. As I said, the way I gathered the story about Augusta Loomis was through a friend who's so deeply, his ancestry is so deeply embedded in Connecticut. Without him, you're just trying to find that string to pull, and you develop these stories. So absolutely, we want the community engagement, because without community engagement, then we don't really go anywhere. So yeah, we would add stories. We're trying to figure out a place to place these, to actually, hold on and archive these stories, and build individuals' genealogy and their ancestry, so that so people can go there and see, like, look at this from the Freedman family, look at this, there's a prominent Black community of Elkies, look from the Elkie family, and how you're connected. You could be connected to a Loomis also, right? So yeah, we want to find a place to hold and archive these stories, because we think that oral narratives and these stories are so important to our history, and that and to our families.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add a little bit to that, because this is a kind of crucial dimension of, I think, how this research evolves, because ultimately the archive is a record of racialization and dehumanization, and a lot of the stories are lost. There's a lot that we don't know and we'll never know. But in order to really, show show the value, we need to crowdsource these stories, and we want to hear from people. And part of the reason for the magazine is to reach a greater audience and to plug them in. There is going to be a continued effort to connect these, the data story of the census figures plus the genealogical research, and then in addition to that, these personal stories and oral histories. I think they all work together, to paint a bigger picture, and ultimately these are also stories of a celebration too, because these are families that have made their life here in Connecticut, and that's to be celebrated too. And so those are not the stories that are archived in the newspapers, but we want to highlight those too. And so that kind of crowdsourcing and public participation in this is really kind of an inversion of the kind of traditional kind of academic scholarly thing, where like scholars go away and they come back with a book. This is the opposite. We want to be out in the community. We want to know and ask questions and learn from y'all, because that's I think where the gold's at.
I just want to remind people that if you have questions, please feel free to type your questions in the chat session on the chat box. We do have several questions. The next question that I have is, will you look at other parts of Connecticut after addressing the 4 phases of the project?
I think this is a lifelong project. So yeah, I think that, there are actual people, researchers doing work all over Connecticut, and it's about bringing all of us together, and bringing all of this work together. So I don't necessarily have to go outside of Greater Hartford, because there are individuals, like I said, like a Christine Pitsley, who I personally know, and others that she knows that are doing pieces of this work all over the state. It's about finding a localized place to bring it all together so that we can do it. But I believe, I'm hooked, and this will be a lifelong project beyond this residency for sure.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I have another question. Is there a public website yet? If so, could you put the URL in the chat, please?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'll just say briefly that yes, there is one coming. It has, as you can imagine, we all have different specializations and we all have different skill sets. Web design and development is not one of our in-house web skill sets. So it's something that we're working with. UConn has a very excellent, top-notch web development think tank called the Greenhouse Studios, which we're in process of working with, and that will eventually be one of the places where we'll be collecting this research and presenting it. And there's currently you can visit the display of these the census maps, and I will drop that in the chat here in just a sec. So Adrian, do you want to add anything maybe also about the magazine?
Sorry, I was reading a comment that I thought was really awesome. Mary Eder, I think is her name. I love that idea, Mary. As far, yeah, we definitely want to have a public space, a public page, and that's in the works also, as Jason said. And the virtual magazine will be a space that you can come to and view things, to get us to that public web page, and connect us and link us to those stories. And further, because some of them might be soap operas. You might be like, well, whatever happened to that family? We want to give you a little snippet, just to make you a little crumb to make you come back. So, you'd have to follow us and follow the progress of the research. So, we want to keep you wanting to learn more about history and hopefully partner with us in some way.
Okay. Have another question. Is there any data to show if businesses owned enslaved people?
We are working on that data. We just finished these this mapping. Trust me, it takes a long time. I know a lot of researchers are on this call right now, but that is a part of the research, is to see what type of businesses did own in slaves. But it's not just the business. Most of the time, someone of the business owned the slaves who work for the business, right? So we're trying to research kind of different type of, what type of labor individuals were in. We've started to look for resources for the docks, for the harbors, to see who was working within those spaces, and if they were actually, someone who was enslaved or claimed as a free person of color who was working for those larger companies. And there are, documents that we know that are, kept in the archives and the state archives that we want to get to eventually once the pandemic is over, so we can actually get down into the library and do some real hardcore research. And also other businesses, that have been here since the beginning of time, some insurance businesses, to see if we can get into their archives to see what was going on.
Okay. Next question. Can we be interested as individual, or is it mostly for people through their work/institution?
I'll let you answer that, Jason. I think.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Can we be interested as individual, or is it mostly for people through their work institution?
I think any way folks want to get involved is there's space for that. From individuals to organizations, there at this point we're kind of experimenting with our internal structure. How do we conduct the research? How do we share the research? And how do we kind of involve other people and make it grow? This is something that I think I'm also learning too from some other colleagues, in particular Fiona Vernal, who is my colleague in the history department, who's done work on the West Indian community here in Hartford, and so there's a lot of other folks who have tried to kind of connect these things and involve different things. So there are a lot of different ways, and really this I think is kind of indicative of the kind of groundswell that we were kind of hoping for, that there wouldn't just be one kind of prototypical way of getting involved to like a page on Facebook or something, but we're interested in people bringing this inquiry and the curiosity and the passion to wherever they are. Really, that's the goal.
Okay. All right. Next question. How would you recommend local history museums, historical societies develop a project of community engagement to collect and tell the stories of the African American community?
I think Gia was actually answering that. If you want to answer that, Gia, for everyone who can't see you.
Yeah, of course. Just kind of adding on to Adrian and I believe Mary's comment, I was just saying that, instead of kind of really focusing on, how to gather that story, I would definitely recommend to focus on how to create that space to gather people instead. And then kind of, also think about your role, whether you want to, be the one to facilitate that kind of conversation, or do you want to leave onto the folks within that community to kind of, appreciating that space and then share their stories that way.
Okay. And then we have another question. Are you using only federal census or state special census as well?
Federal, mainly federal, but through state stuff. So we're multiple ways that we're going through the census and looking through them. We started with the federal, obviously, and then we went on to start to dig deeper into the federal census through the state specialized census.
Okay. All right. Okay, another question. Who should I contact? From Nora Howard, historian of Avon and of Avon Congregational Church. So the question is who to contact.
We left our information in the chat box for anyone who would like to contact us. There's 3 different emails. So whoever you click on first, feel free to contact. We'll all get to each other for sure.
Pick your favorite.
Okay. Is there or should there be a BiPOC bibliography of Connecticut history? I'm pretty sure there is a large but scattered and disaggregated body of resources that is, as a whole, could be extremely informative.
Yep, that's a great question. Thank you, Walt. I see you. Very much appreciated. And yes, I think that's a great invocation of the broader work that's needed. And I think one of the things to point out is that as you're saying that the work has been done in sort of concentrated in either regional or localized or ethnic specific kind of contexts. And the thing that I would love to see is kind of work that looks at community interactions, not just a solitary kind of ethnic profile of individuals, but see how communities are engaged in living together. and how that transpires, the hardships, but also the joys that are experienced together. And I think sometimes when we envision histories in silos, it tends to shape our vision of the future in silos. And so I think if we can paint integrated pictures of the past, it kind of helps for us to see each other together in the future. But definitely a bibliography that brings all of those things together, that's a great starting point.
Awesome.
I agree.
Awesome. Are there any other questions from the audience? Please feel free to type them in the chat section right now. This was really, really informative. Thank you all so much for taking time out to be a part of this discussion. Really, really, really great information. A great resource.
Well, thank you guys for having us. We appreciate it. Thank you, Jason, Gia. You guys are the real MVPs, keeping the team together, keeping us going. So I appreciate everyone who came today, and please feel free to contact us in any way with resources, with stories, with, if you want an update, we're welcome to all partnerships, because we want to make sure these stories are told and this history is complete. So thank you all.
All right. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all.
All right. I also like to give a shout out to Christine Pitsley for really helping to bring this together. And thanks for her hard work.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you all.
Okay, well, I think that concludes today's program. We thank you all for joining our third Thursday today. We do have our third Thursday coming up in March. Stay tuned to our website for information in regards to our March third Thursday program. So again, I want to thank you all for coming out, and I thank the panelists for the panel for being a part of this great program. And I just want to say take care, everyone, and we'll see you next month. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
No kidding.
Adrian, I was actually surprised that my dog didn't bark like this whole time. I was just like
Me too. I was
praying.
waiting for Cream Puff to bark. I was like,
I was just like, she fell asleep on my sweater. Ah,
Stop, guy. Oh,
that was awesome.
hang on.
Who all do we have left? Who's on here?
I think like 7 people. 6 people now.
Hang on. We got to stop the live.
she's like right there.
Hey, Cream Puff. I got a Cream Puff below me too. It's called my child.
Here we go.
Thank you guys. That was so great. That turned out. I get emotional when I get overwhelmed when I'm excited about stuff, and like this project means so much to me. Like I get overwhelmed just thinking about how it's gonna actually turn out. You know what I mean? So I start to get a little teary-eyed.